This instructional video is going to have two parts. The first part is this slideshow, and then the second part is an actual demonstration. So let's think about positive statements. What are positive statements? Often they're an affirmation. They can help you challenge negative thoughts. It's about positive thinking. That's what it's really aimed on. And they're often personalized. Sometimes they're targeted towards certain groups of people. These are some examples of positive statements. What could this positive statement mean? What about this positive statement? So where can we find positive statements? Sometimes we just find them as quotes from celebrities. These two, Katy Perry and Jay-Z, we both know that they're involved in music. These two examples of positive statements, I found them on social media, on Instagram. And we can also find positive statements in the form of posters that one might display in a gym for working out. And we can also find positive statements in advertising. So these are two advertisements one might encounter in a magazine. And even Sephora, which is a beauty supply store, at some point in the year 2021, they had a promotion promoting products that are Black-owned products, right? Black-owned brands. So they have the phrase right here, try something good, right? That is a positive statement. So this is your lesson 3.7, positive statement plaques. Now this is an actual ceramic project. So the objectives, you're going to create two statement plaques or tiles that communicate positive statements. You might only have time to create one, but if you have time, you can create two. You're properly and neatly cutting out a shape using a fettling knife, a template, and or a cookie cutter. And you're using texture rollers, mats, and letter stamps to create texture. We're using excellent craftsmanship when cutting out the clay, using the stamps, and drawing the designs. And later on, you'll be exploring glaze colors as a way to decorate the surface. These are some student examples from the past. And these are a few that have been glazed. Now, basically what you're doing is you're using a slab of clay that is flat. The shape of the tile is traced using a template, like a thick piece of paper, or it's cut using a cookie cutter, and then the letters are stamped onto the surface. This is a form of an impression. And we also have some other stamps you'll be able to use. These works are intended to be hung on the wall, so they're wall plaques. So you will be adding holes. And you can also draw images onto the surface. So do you have to use the letter stamps? No, you can draw the words by hand. The requirement, you're creating one statement plaque. Please create two if you have the time. The statement should relate to positivity. You could be using something from a song. It could be a quote. Your statements should have at least 3 words. And each plaque should have at least 2 things or images that have been stamped onto the surface. This is not including the words. How would you start? Well, maybe begin by researching. You could use the search term positive statements or positive affirmations, positive quotes, positive song lyrics, right? These are just some suggestions for your Google search. And I do need to see a plan before you receive a slab of clay. You're going to sketch the actual shape. So look at the templates, go look at the cookie cutters that I have available. Write out the entire statement. So how will you organize the words? Are you going to use all uppercase letters? Maybe take a look at the letter stamps that I have available. You're going to draw the 2 textures you plan to use and where. So go look at the texture rollers. Go look at the texture mats. Look at the stamps that I have available. Go check them out. Go see what's there. In your drawing, make sure you include those 2 holes that you'll be poking out. And there is a back of the worksheet if you need to use it. And when you're making your plaque, try to follow your plan. All right, now we have a demo time. And yes, you need to watch this. Once I've seen your plan for your positive statement plaque, I'm going to give you a piece of clay. Make sure you take your rubber rib and that we smooth out the clay. We don't know which part is going to be the top or the bottom of this clay, so I would just definitely flip it over and make sure you're smoothing both sides. The next part is finding a template, and you should have seen some of these templates already when you were planning out your design. So we've got some circular ones here. You could use a large cookie cutter if you want. I'm going to go ahead and use this larger size because this is my current plan that I'm working with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my fettling knife and we're going to actually cut this out. Make sure you hold on to the template if you're using a template, and make sure we're getting clean cuts so we don't end up dragging the clay surface too much. And you can just save whatever extra clay you have. You can add it to your current clay pile and you can use that later. Now, could you score and slip things onto your tile? Certainly, if you choose to. Make sure you get some slip and you have a paintbrush, and make sure you're doing the scoring and slipping properly. So let me get this set up and then we'll move on to the next step. Before we add anything to our tile, it's a good idea to maybe add a little water to your hand just to smooth out the sides of this slab. We don't want the edges of the slab to be actually sharp, because that will actually, when it fires, it stays sharp. So the next step is actually looking at your plan, thinking, okay, what am I going to be doing? And I think for my plan, I'm going to start with actually the outside. I planned on using this texture roller to create this design on the back, so I'm going to take care of that. The bottom part of my design actually has some clouds. I could draw them in right now, but I actually want to move on to putting the letters so I make sure I have enough room for the bottom. So this is what I've done with this texture roller. So again, you have a bunch of different things to choose from for letter stamps. We have little sets like this. These are new. We have a bunch of these ones. So again, you should have checked out these things when you were planning your positive statement plaque. We also have these ones. These are 3D printed letter stamps, but they're too big for my space. So you still have to think about the actual size of your plaque. So I'm going to go ahead with these. And to use these, you actually can attach each piece together. So I'm going to put some of these letters down and then you'll pop back in and see what's happening. All right, so I've done two words here. This says on the, and just notice with this type, and you might notice this with some of the other stamps as well, depending how hard you push in, you might end up with this border. You can actually use one of your sculpting tools to neatly remove that border. Now, if you totally mess up your letter, you can smooth it out, but the more pressure you put onto the clay is not going to be forgiving. It's going to get pushed in. So it's just something to keep in mind as you're putting your letters in. Checking in, I have the first set of my phrase. On the other side, so actually I want to do this set where it says of the clouds. I actually want to draw it by hand just because I want to make it look interesting. So I'm going to use a ball stylus tool actually. I could use a needle tool, but the needle tool might make the lines a little too thin. So, and again, I'm already thinking about having a stamp placed here. So I'm actually going to go in just really carefully and actually draw in these letters for of the clouds. And you'll notice that when you do use a needle tool or a ball stylus tool, you do end up with a lot of clay boogers. That is totally normal. You just kind of have to just remove them as you work. Also, when the clay dries out, it sometimes can be a little bit easier to remove those clay boogers. But again, I'm thinking about that we're going to be glazing these. So I want to make sure I go thick enough with my lines so we can easily glaze them in the future. So I'm going to continue on and have the phrase of the clouds drawn in. All right, so I drew in my letters here of the clouds using a ball stylus tool, and I'm going to actually show you how I can use some stamps. So I have one of the 3D printed stamps. These are red. These are made by hand. They're 3D printed, so be gentle with them. But we also have these plaster stamps, and they're located in the room. You'll find them. They're white. What's cool about the plaster is the clay doesn't stick to it so easily. So you can also test these out. You might want to test them on some extra clay before you use them on your plaque. But I definitely want to have this pineapple here. I know it's kind of random. It doesn't really relate to the quote, but I just like the way it looks. So I'm going to push it in there, and then I'm going to end up with this imprint of the pineapple. And then I want this flower here. So I'm going to put this flower right here. And I already had that kind of planned on my drawing. And there we go. There's our flower. So I'm going to continue adding the rest of the letters, and then I'll show you what happened next. All right, so I have finished adding all the letters and the words. Now, just a word of advice, if you are trying to carve anything in and you're just getting lots and lots of boogers, your clay might be just too soft. That's normal. So how you can make your clay firm up a little bit is maybe put it outside and let it sit for a little bit. Now, when you're all done adding everything that you had planned from your paper, the next step is getting one of these hole cutters. We don't need a really big hole, but we're going to put 2 holes sort of at the top. You might want to take a needle tool just to kind of gauge. I wouldn't put it super close, but I'm going to have one over here and one here. Now that is too small for a hole, so I'm going to actually use the hole cutter. And again, to use that, you just slip it through the clay surface. I have my fingers in the back to just kind of make sure I don't warp the entire piece of clay. I spin that tool around just to help pull the clay out, and make sure we empty this out. Please don't just leave it filled with clay. And then we're going to do this other side as well. And this is when you're cleaning up your tile. So if you need to trim anything, remove something, and then when you're all done, be sure to take a picture of this. Take a picture. We do want to take a picture before it's been fired. And also on the back side of your plaque, you're going to put your initials and class period. So this is how we always know which class and who it belongs to. So those are my initials, and we'll just pretend I'm in period 3. So that's all you need. You don't need to write your name. You don't have to put an artist signature. You don't have to write the word period. You just need your initials and class period. And then you're going to, again, make sure you take a photo of your completed plaque, and you'll be turning it in with your plan. Turn it in with your plan on the metal cart in the clay room. And then you can either make another plaque, or if that's all the time you have, then you just made one. And there you go.